Alright guys, so I'm going to show you some of the apps that I use and how I plan out my trips. The first thing that I look at is the weather. So I use Windy for that. When you first open the app, it has the wind speed and all of that already up, and then you got your little timeline down here that you can use to scroll through when you might be fishing. I always look a good bit ahead and a good bit after, because things change, and it's usually they change according to what's coming or before or after. So that gives you a heads up for what might happen if the actual prediction doesn't happen. So first I look at the wind direction, the wind speed, and that determines mainly where I'm gonna fish. So for instance, if the wind's going in this direction, that means this area here on an outgoing tide is going to be rough, because this body of water is running in the same direction that the wind is going, and an outgoing tide would be going in the opposite direction of the wind. So you might want to avoid that area in an outgoing tide on this day. On the flip side of that, all of this area is protected by this island here. So you can probably find calmer waters all around in these areas here. These back creeks here will be good. The more you're in open water where the wind has some distance to move across it, the more likely you are to get into rough water. So that's how I use the wind to kind of pick a spot. With this prediction, it's pretty low winds until you get out around the islands. So that means all of this is pretty much good to go. I probably wouldn't be trying to get out to this creek here. I leave out from back here. So I wouldn't want to cross this body of water, particularly in my boat. In a bigger boat, a day like this, it wouldn't be bad. But I'm gonna look for spots in here, up in here, some of the spots close by maybe. That's where I'm gonna be fishing at. Maybe up into Mud River here some, because I can come the back way through here and get into there without having to get into big water. So you can use the wind direction and speed to kind of pick where you're gonna focus your day. From there, you can go to maps or Google Earth or whatever. And so we determined that we don't want to fish Sapelo Sounds. We may want to try, let's say we're going to try to get into Mud River. I particularly like to fish this south end of Mud River. So we're going to go and change over to satellite, which gives us an actual satellite image of the area. Alright, and so we're going to fish Mud River and target this side of it. What I'm gonna look at next is the temperature, what the water temperature's like. If it's really hot and I'm gonna be out there in a really hot day, I'm probably gonna be fishing some of these deeper areas up in Eagle Creek here, the mouth of Tea Kettle, stuff like that, rather than up here on this mud flat. So depending on the temperature and the weather and the wind, we'll pick a spot that we want to kind of fish first. let's say it's going to be an early morning, so I'm not so much worried about the temperature. Outgoing tide, you know, we'll look at tides and I'll show you how I find tides and stuff like that. I may fish up on this flat right here around this little island. So that's maps. If you don't know the area, you can zoom in really far and see you've got all of this oyster here that is good structure. You got some more shell mounds out here in the middle of the river. If you come on down, there's a big group of marsh islands and other shell mounds and stuff like that. So you can zoom in and find where the structure's at. You can tell where the deep water's at by the color of the water. These lighter areas are going to be real shallow. The darker areas are going to be your deeper water. So that'll tell you where you can kind of target fish at. What I'll do, say I've never fished this area, you know, I'm gonna start down here, zoom in, kind of move along and look and be like, okay, some of this looks good, but it's gonna be real shallow, so depending on tide I may or may not be able to get in there. Keep moving down. You've got some deeper water here next to some shell mounds, so maybe I'll stop by and see what's on those, and then, you know, work on down through the channel here, and then you start getting into this grass here. You know, you work this bank down through here, see if you get any bites. If the tide's up, you could come around the backside and fish some of this loose grass here, and see what's hanging out in there. You've got, again, some deeper structure here around deeper water, so if the tide's down real far, you can kind of get around these and try to fish some of this. Clearly there's a boat there already doing that. So you'll just kind of move through an area and pick, you know, a few areas to target. Like, I'm gonna hit this, I'm gonna hit this, I'm gonna hit this. If that's not being productive, you know, they're not out here on the flats around these grass islands and stuff, I'm gonna move in and look at these creeks. All right, hit this creek mouth, hit this fork in the creek. There's probably some shell right here around this little island here. I'll probably hit that. That's probably as deep as I'm gonna go in there unless I'm seeing some good bait activity or something like that. Move out. You've got some drains here, so if it's an outgoing tide, there's going to be bait flushing out of the marsh and these. Focus on some of that. You've got another creek mouth here. We'll go up in this creek. There's a big shell bed right there. It looks like it gets pretty shallow. The way you can tell that the creek starts to get too shallow is this water is nice and green, and then it turns to like a tan sandy color here. There's not going to be very much water there, and it's going to be dirty. So that's, you can tell by the color of the water what you're looking at, you know, the more you get to do this. This looks good because you have this creek dumping out, but then you have this nice little cove here as well, so they have options. You know, they can be in creek mouths or up in the creek, out here in the deeper water, or up here on this little flat. So that's a good spot to kind of check out, and you just go along the map and you look. There's a nice point sticking out right there, so the fish can kind of sit in this slack water as this water's dumping out of here and ambush. I would hit that. You know, get you a little bit of a game plan together. You know, find some spots. I'll probably come in, fish this, because I come from, you know, this direction. Come in, fish some of this, fall off, come up through here, fish these grass islands. If nothing happens in that, come across where I've got good water here and start working back up into this until it gets too shallow, depending on what the tide's doing. If it's coming in at that point, you know, you could come hit this and fish this way as the tide comes up in, and then get around in the backside of this grass island, fish some of this part of this island. You know, you just got to plan out what the tide's doing, what your wind's doing, and find an area that's going to be conducive to those things, and then start picking out your structure, your creek mouths, your depth changes, your shell beds, your grass islands, and you're going to be thinking in the back of your head, what are the trends I've been seeing? What are my friends posting up? You know, what are they doing on Low Country Fishing or Pine Harbor Marsh Rats, or what are people posting? And use those trends to kind of figure out, okay, so and so posted they caught 10 redfish up on a flat. Well, maybe I want to focus more time on this flat. They're saying they're in deeper water. I'm going to get over here around these islands here, creek mouths. Maybe work more down this way instead of working up this way. So that's how I plan that. From there, to figure out what I'm going to do, I like to use Navionics. And it's not a free app. It's like $14.99 a year or something like that. But it gives you GPS. You know, you can set routes. You can leave waypoints. It's pretty much just like a chart plotter. It's got really cool things like, okay, say I'm at the marina and I'm gonna fish around the marina. I can highlight this beacon and it pulls up the tide swings. So I know right now it's, you know, plus 1.9 from the mean low tide. I can tell that the low tide is going to be, you know, half a foot below mean low. I can tell that the high tide is going to be, you know, 6.7 foot above mean low. And you can scroll through and see exactly what the tide's doing at exactly what time in that area, okay? So maybe I'm not fishing there. There's one there, 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 there's one there. So you can tell exactly what the tide's doing in the area that you're fishing. That's awesome. You can also tell what the current's doing. Alright, so you've got this arrow here. You click on that and it gives you a graph of what the current's doing. When the high, you know, the most current is, when the least current is, how fast all of that changes. Alright, so we see there's pretty good current there. We can come down here to Mud River, click on this one, and you've got much different current. So if you're in big spring tides and the current, you know, you're facing big tides, you might want to come fish over here because that swing is not as big. So you can use Navionics to do a lot of things. You also can go down here to the layers and do satellite overlay from Bing. So now you have Apple Maps and you have satellite from Bing, two different images, maybe at different tide stages, so you can see what it looks like at low tide in that creek versus high tide. Or if you're looking for flooded grass flats, you might want to see a high tide image. So you can use different maps to see different tidal stages, and you just gotta have to cycle through them to figure out which one's giving you the image that you need. The other thing about Navionics is it pretty much gives you restaurants, anchorages, wrecks. Like, so it's showing there's a wreck right here. Well, there's 23. It'll also tell you the depth and all kind of stuff. So wreck showing any portion of hull superstructure always dry. So you know you're not going to fish that one if it's always dry. But there may be an underwater wreck that you can't see otherwise, and Navionics tells you it's there. And there you've got structure. You can go fish in deeper water that's probably not getting pressured by every average angler that's just cruising through the creeks. Let's see, I think there's a wreck right here somewhere that's like that. But anyways, I'm not gonna spend too much time looking for wrecks. It also shows you good anchorages. So like if you're traveling by boat somewhere, good spot close to the ICW, yada 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 yada. So that's pretty much it. So I'll take all of this information, my wind direction, my tide, the strength of the tide, what the weather's doing, all of that comes into factor, and then I pair that up with what the fish have been doing. So the trends that the fish have been doing. If they're moving out, you know, the water temp's rising, they're moving out towards bigger water, you know, well, bigger water, this is all shallow, there's some good deep water through the sounds. Maybe I want to hit these different creeks that are closer to the sounds here. Stuff like that. There's, shell structure here that's close to the sounds that maybe I want to hit. So you just have to put it all together and put a game plan together. Always have a plan B. That's why when I pick an area, I find 2 or 3 different spots that have different types of structure, different types of water depth, and you get in the area, and then you have to kind of just play it, feel it out, play it by ear, and see what the water clarity's like, see what, all of this information is all just the best guess. So things change, they're not always 100% accurate, and so when you get in the spot, you just got to be able to fly by the seat of your pants and make decisions on what you need to do to try to find fish. And that's how I do it. From there, this stuff also plays into lure selection. If it's going to be a cloudy day, I might throw some darker baits. If it's going to be a bright sunny day, I'm going to throw some clear baits. If it's really hot, I'm probably not going and fishing artificial. I'm going to use some live bait to try to get those fish to eat. Just things like that. You just got to learn from being on the water how to make adjustments, change things up. So I hope this helps you guys. I hope it gives you a little bit of insight on how to plan out a trip and not go out there willy-nilly and just go hit that same spot that you caught fish in last time, because the fish might not be there. They may be there close by and you're missing them because you're just hitting that spot and you're not looking at what the variables are doing and how that may change where the fish are sitting. So you want to watch your water temp, you want to watch your water clarity, you want to watch your wind speed and wind direction, you want to watch your tide and the amount of current that you have at the time, because all of that fluctuates based on the moons. I hope all of this makes sense and I put it together somewhat coherently. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to this, so I just kind of skimmed over it. If y'all have questions, get on the Marsh Rats page and ask them, man. That's what it's there for. Y'all stay tuned with all of that and participate, and let's get out there and rip some lips.